Now, Washington mornings on the Mall. 105.9 FM. And AM 630. WMAL.
7:07 on WMAL. Good Friday morning to you. Brian Neiman, Brian Wilson. The day after the Supreme Court rules upholds Obamacare. That is the headline for the most part. Did say that it is unconstitutional via the Commerce Clause, but through some gymnastics, some pretzel logic, Chief Justice John Roberts and the other liberal judges decided that it can stand based on Congress's ability to tax. So now it is being called Obamacare, but tax care. I guess that could be one way you could put it out there for this morning.
The Obama tax.
Waiting for Senator Jim DeMint to call in, and when he does get on the phone, we'll bring him on. There's a lot of questions to ask this morning. I think it's still unclear on how this thing is going to work moving forward now that it is officially a tax. Well, we're getting your reaction to it, 1-888-630-9625, and you can also text feedback to 68683. We've been going over this for quite some time this morning. It basically is, I don't quite understand how this could have happened in the first place. It seems to me a big judicial overreach to say, well, even though it wasn't declared a tax in the bill itself, and they argued that it wasn't a tax when they were passing the bill, and it would not have passed most likely had they declared it a tax from the get-go, but now it is a tax. So, well, moving forward. Senator Jim DeMint is on the line right now. We have the senator from South Carolina on. I want to get into what happens next, Senator, but first, what was your initial reaction to the ruling from the Supreme Court yesterday?
Well, I have to admit I was stunned. I was disappointed and angry, just as I found out more of actually how they came up with the decision, particularly the Chief Justice, as I think you were just talking about. This bill was sold as a mandate as part of the Commerce Clause. It was written into language as a mandate with a penalty. The president promised it was not a tax. So And it sounds like they ruled the bill as a written unconstitutional, but they changed it, at least in their own minds, to say, okay, well, if it really meant this, then it would be constitutional. So, well, but there's no need for us even talking about it. That's
right.
It makes the election a whole lot clearer. If Americans want socialized health care and a socialized economy here in America, they'll vote for Barack Obama. If they want to try to restore those principles that made us great and prosperous, Mitt Romney's the alternative. And for my purposes, we need some senators who are going to make sure we get better judges in the future, but also repeal Obamacare and help turn the country around.
Well, let me ask you this. Because it has been declared a tax now, does that make it easier to repeal?
Well, I think it does. I mean, it would have never passed if it was called a tax in the first place. I think Americans can understand it a little better, that it's going to affect them individually regardless of their income.
But by that I mean, can you go through reconciliation, and do you only need 50 votes?
You're right. Well, 51 votes, if it's a tax, the way the bill was ultimately passed was under reconciliation with 51 votes. So certainly we could, and with Paul Ryan helping to structure that budget in the House, I think we've got a good chance of not just repealing Obamacare, but reforming our tax code and doing some of the entitlement fixes that we need to save Social Security and Medicare.
You know, Senator, I get what you're saying about lick your wounds, move on. This does define what the coming election is about. I get all that, but I just want to look back for just one moment longer. When this was on the floor of the United States Senate, can you imagine that Ben Nelson of Nebraska would have voted in favor of this law if he knew it was a tax? Would Mary Landrieu have voted for this law if he knew it was a tax?
No, I think there would have been mass defections if it was presented this way in an honest way. So the fact is it was passed as with a lie, as a fraud, and that's probably the most serious thing if Americans will digest that. Justice Roberts said in his decision that it wasn't their job to protect the people from their political choices, but it's also not their job to change the legislation from its original intent. So we can talk about that for a long time. We know it wouldn't have passed if it was sold as a tax increase. But hopefully now it'll make the election clearer. And this is really a make-or-break election. It's not just Obamacare. It's so many things. The president is his whole idea of pro-growth economics is government growth and spending and debt. He's selling that to the Europeans. It's just crossed the line into what I call dangerous. So we really got to turn our country around, and I'm just counting on the American people now, because what the court did is put our freedom and our future back in the hands of the American people. So I'm confident they'll rise up in November.
I mean, some have said that this resets the political equation back to 2010.
It does, and from what I've seen across the country, despite what you hear about the death of the Tea Party, when you see what happened in Indiana with a challenger knocking off one of our longest-term incumbents, Dick Lugar, we're seeing in Texas where someone they gave no chance, Ted Cruz, running against a multimillionaire, now looks like he can pull it off in the runoff. But I think that energy is still there. And the decision yesterday is only going to fan the flames of freedom.
Well, do you know even how this will work now that it has been declared a tax? I mean, will our taxes go up right away, or at the end of the year do you have to check a box that says you don't have health insurance? Is it a write-off like a mortgage interest? Does anybody even know how this will work moving forward at this point?
Well, as you know, the way this is structured, the benefits start cutting in right away, and the taxes you'll start seeing them in 2014. But what it means is if you don't buy just the right health plan, and the IRS will always be checking on us, that now we're subject to the IRS in the healthcare arena. And people who've never had to deal with the IRS or the threat of the IRS, really the poor and middle class, are going to be subject to that kind of scrutiny. They're hiring thousands of new IRS agents to follow us around and make sure we have the right health plan. If Americans really understand what this is going to mean in their lives, I would think the most liberal American would vote for Mitt Romney. But getting out the word is going to be hard. You heard what the president said yesterday. It's helping all these folks who couldn't get health insurance. But millions of Americans who have it are going to lose it because of this plan.
Right. Now, what about the Medicaid portion of the ruling yesterday, and what does that mean for the states?
Well, we've been looking at the reaction of a number of governors. The president of the Republican Governors Association, Bob McDonnell, has suggested that all Republicans not implement Obamacare. They certainly don't have to put people on their Medicaid rolls with this court decision, because the law was forcing states to expand the eligibility to Medicaid to I think like 140% of poverty, when most states have it around 100. That's how over half of the people who Obama claims he's going to cover are covered. They just force them into Medicaid. The court ruling means that the states, if they don't do that, they don't lose their current Medicaid funding. That's the way the law was set up, is either you go along, or we're not only not going to give you the new stuff, we're going to take what you've been getting for Medicaid. So this gives the states a little latitude if they want to try to push back and not implement this plan. They're not going to lose all the money that they currently are getting for Medicaid.
All right, let me just follow up then. You're saying 51 votes, if all Republicans votes to repeal it, would pass in the Senate. But what if it was 50 and then you had the vice president, who you would presume would be a Republican, if Mitt Romney wins? Could he break the tie, or do you need 51? What is the ruling on it?
If it was 50-50 and on a vote like that, yeah, the vice president could break the tie.
Okay.
So we're in the game. The challenge we have is we might have a few Republicans in the Senate who are not willing to go along with a budget that actually begins to curtail spending, and that's going to be our challenge. And that's why my whole focus in the next few months is to elect people like Ted Cruz in Texas and Mark Newman in Wisconsin and Josh Mandel in Ohio. There are 5 or 6 people, Richard Murdoch, Indiana, that if we could get them in the Senate. If you watched the Senate the last year, it's changed a whole lot of ways with people like Rand Paul and Pat Toomey and Marco Rubio. If we get 4 or 5 more like that, I think we have a chance to turn our country around.
All right, Senator DeMint, good to have you on the program. Thanks for coming on.
Senator, thanks so much.
Thank you both.